Righty, we're now going to move on to our next speaker. That is a small world because I have worked with Chris previously as well. Chris Goldsmith is the lead entity director for NGCC at NZ Police. And he's had 25 years experience leading delivery of strategic change within government telecommunications and healthcare. He joined police in 2013 and is focused on emergency service sector investments in assurance and new communications capabilities. He was appointed the director of the NGCC lead entity in 2020. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Craig. So today I'm going to talk about a major investment by the New Zealand government that was committed in February of this year to replacing all the critical communications for emergency services. So when I talk about emergency services, I'm talking about fire, police, St John and Wellington Free Ambulance. And we've been on, as a sector, a journey for a number of years. For those of you who've been around a while, you'll have heard of a thing called Whole of Government Radio Network that kind of ended in 2012 with a business case the government couldn't afford. And this is sort of laboured around. A few years ago, we got underway with a business casing process, and in February we achieved government support for a significant investment in what is effectively replacing the frontline communications that our frontline responders use every single day to deliver our service into all parts of New Zealand. Next slide, please. Next one after that. So for many of you, you won't have a lot of appreciation for our communications capability. Most of our frontline officers respond with walkie-talkie radios. You've seen them on television. They're pretty simple push-to-talk voice only devices with a little bit of status messaging. In more recent years, organisations such as police have invested heavily in cellular, but really we have a capability that is a number of years old. In fact, most of our New Zealand push-to-talk capability is between 20 and 30 years old and is no longer supported. In fact, by 2023, we won't be able to support those platforms anymore. So hence we need this investment. But it's not just about replacing apples with apples. It's about moving to a broadband, a modern critical communications future that goes a lot further than just giving people cell phones and modern devices. It's about having a look at our frontline response capability and seeing how the application of modern critical communications, be it data, be it voice, be it video or telemetry, can change the way in which our frontline responders deliver service to our communities. You know, we live today in a world where our cellular capability is predominantly around where people live. You know, that's fabulous for your average consumer. Unfortunately, we respond where people tend to go, which is pretty much anywhere in New Zealand. So for us to adopt commercial capability is a little bit of a struggle. We, you know, as a sector and organisations, we rely on situational awareness to in real time design responses to emergency situations. And the use of information can seriously improve the health outcomes or the safety outcomes for New Zealanders. So, you know, we, like all commercial organisations, are really driven by public expectation. You know, the general public watches CSI or all of these television dramas, and they see all this wonderful capability, and it doesn't go unnoticed. In fact, we've looked at it as a global community and can see a lot of value in that. And so this investment really is about enabling us to make that leap into the future. And the government expects us to. More importantly, the government actually expects us as a sector to work closer together. Next slide, please. So here is a very good example of us having to work together with our current capability. We'll all be familiar with Whakaare last year blowing up. We had a multiple response incident here where 47 people were killed. Sorry, 21 people were killed, 26 people were injured, and 47 lives were changed forever. We had police, fire and ambulance, even defence, a bunch of health providers, and a significant number of government organisations responding, along with a few ministers in the mix, just to sort of pep it up. It was a huge event for us, and we were in a situation where really we couldn't communicate very effectively with each other. We brought cellular into play and had truckloads of cell phones there to try and standardise our mechanisms for talking to each other, and it made a huge difference. But the use of video and those sorts of capabilities were sparsely available, but very, very useful for people who were sitting in our back office, so they could really come to grips with what we needed to deploy in the way of an operational response. And this is really the nub of this, is it's really all about our response and how modern critical communications can enable us to respond better. Next slide, please. So modernising our public safety network, just quickly, it helps us seriously with situational awareness. It improves our service delivery, medical triage. We can get consultants in hospitals to be supporting paramedics who are responding in the field, and really turn up our ability to take care of New Zealanders. We can work together as multiple agencies in a more effective way, which is particularly useful in things like multiple car accidents where we have police, fire and ambulance there, fire cutting their way through vehicles, ambulance taking people to hospital, police doing traffic control and dealing with the compliance and legal obligations of the scene. A modern public safety network will give us reliable coverage and access throughout New Zealand to not only our voice communications, but data and video and telemetry. These things are, your average teenager these days just expects this capability. We haven't had this capability, and we need this capability, and are in the process of investing in this capability. It allows us to resource track, which is really critical in a nationwide capability, such as police, fire and ambulance, where we've got dozens of specialist resources located quite dynamically throughout New Zealand. And at the end of the day, it keeps our people safer and gives them access to the latest information. Next slide, please. And the next one. So as I said before, this is all about, this investment is all about improving public outcomes. And so this slide really gives you an insight into the scale of the transformation. We have round about 40 to 50,000 staff broken up into two category groups, staff and volunteers. Over 6,000 or thereabouts vehicles and 1,400 stations throughout New Zealand. That's a terrifically large amount of infrastructure and people who need to go through this transformation process. And as you can appreciate, this is like changing the engines on a 747 at 40,000 feet. We don't stop as a sector to down tools, modernise, and up tools and walk out the door and respond to you. We have to do it while we're in action, responding to New Zealanders. Next slide. Okay, so New Zealand's investment in modernising our critical communications is really falling in behind of a global trend. And there are three major jurisdictions in the world that are ahead of us at this time. There's FirstNet in the United States, there's ESN in the UK, and there's SafeNet in South Korea. These jurisdictions are, like us, replacing historical voice communications and bringing broadband capability on a nationwide basis. They're all doing it differently, but the essence of the outcome is the same. In the United States, they are spending somewhere in the region of $6.5 billion US dollars, and ESN in the UK is spending somewhere in the region of $4 to $5 billion, I think. Don't quote me on that. In South Korea, the number of cell sites being built are sort of in the region of between 20,000 dedicated and access to a further 80,000 sites throughout the country. And in terms of architecture, they're all quite different. New Zealand is predominantly following the US approach, which is to seek to acquire an extension to public commercial services and not build our own standalone broadband network. The United States have partnered with AT&T, and AT&T have extended their networks into areas that are special, that need coverage to meet the requirements of emergency jurisdictions, and added features into their networks to provide priority preemption and quality of service. As you can appreciate on a cellular network, I think we've all been to a football match and stood there and watched our cellular device fail miserably. That won't work if you're a frontline responder. You need your device to work appropriately. And so what's happened over the last 10 years is the global standards bodies have introduced a series of features into the standard releases for cellular technology, and those features will become available to us in New Zealand as a result of this investment. Next slide, please. So, you know, you can appreciate New Zealand is a very challenging geography, and rural New Zealand doesn't come cheap to provide any kind of coverage, along with the fact that we have parts of New Zealand, down Fiordland and so forth, where, to be honest, people don't go. So it's quite a challenging geography to get the sort of coverage that we need. And look, it's really important to remember that coverage for us is about where people live, work, and go. It's not about you know, just where people live and, you know, looking at some fancy brochure that says it's 99% of population coverage. That's a giggle in our sector because we're about geographical coverage, which of course brings those numbers back. You know, for us, it's a whole contrasting kind of dynamic in there between, you know, for argument's sake, coverage between Mountaintop and downtown Lambton Quay or Queen Street, you know, and everything in between. You know, in terms of resilience, people talk about BAU all the time, you know, the availability of cellular networks. Well, we're talking about disaster availability, because we really earn our bread and butter. When everyone's running the other way, we tend to run contrary to that because we're the first responders. So we need robust, reliable, available, and good coverage. And that's what we call our public safety network capability. There's a number of ways that we can get there. And at this point in time, we're looking at what we can do with the existing cellular networks in New Zealand and potentially bringing them together in order to create a capability that leverages both the resilience that we would gain from multiple networks, but also the coverage improvement. Because responders need very reliable, robust coverage. A second part of our investment strategy is really around an alternative capability. So we're big users of digital land mobile radio, and we have a huge land mobile radio network, arguably the biggest network in New Zealand, that I'm responsible for, which is Police's existing network that Fire also use. We have the ability to upgrade that and offer that as a very basic voice push-to-talk service as an alternative capability for our frontline officers, and we're intending to provide that capability through into our vehicles, but not through to individual officers responding. This gives our frontline the ability, if their cellular capability was to fail, to be able to access some communications capability. To give you sort of an understanding of the numbers, we do over 1 million transactions over our existing push-to-talk networks in police every year, but we do in excess of 22 million transactions over our consumer-grade data network that we have, using a series of applications which enable us to do everything from a risk assessment through to timesheeting, through to jobs and so forth. So, you know, the world for us isn't about push-to-talk so much as what the applications can do to changing our world. And, you know, you see that now when you get pulled over, God forbid, to have a speeding ticket issued, and the officer pulls out their device and brings up your license and plugs in your details, and then the ticket turns up 4 days later. That's all end-to-end electronic now, and that saves time, money, and is certainly a much more efficient process. Next slide, please. So these are the benefits for our communities. You know, our communities expect that we have this capability, that we are well informed, that we have the tools to do our job, and that's really at the DNA of this investment. It's a whole step change in replacing our existing capability. And so, you know, we have at times had security challenges, and those will once and for all be sorted. But as I said before, we have a significant challenge. Our geography in New Zealand, I don't think there's a straight road in this country. Whether it's state highways, whether it's areas of significance which aren't always in very easily accessible locations, we have to have our communications capability there. And so this is quite a challenge for us in delivering this upgrade to our community. Let's change. Next slide, please. So look, what I want to leave you with is the organisations who are putting this together and delivering this as an outcome for the New Zealand government and ultimately our community. Next slide, please. We have 3 organisations who are involved in this. Starting on the right, clearly we've got 4 participating agencies. And our investment is designed in such a way that we can extend that further to other government agencies, you know, such as Customs, MPI, and various defence and other agencies who may in the future choose to uptake on the critical communications capability. But really, there's a collective of participating agencies who are responsible for transitioning their organisations onto the new capability. We have an independent business unit that I'm the director of, NGCC. We have our own board. Rob Fife is the chair of my board, and we have a very accomplished set of directors of our board. The reason we set up an independent business unit that happens to be hosted by police is just because you can appreciate in a cross-sector scenario, you need to have a vehicle for having pretty neutral development conversations when you're developing a capability that's got to be used by everyone. And no one agency can do that. You need to have an independent agency set up for this purpose. There's a wider strategic view of the function of this business unit, and I welcome you to go and have a look at our website under the strategy section, which talks to some of our other initiatives, which are around developing common capability for our sector, and really modernising the critical communications capability in its broadest sense for New Zealand. I think one of the things that I see is that New Zealand is very much punching above its weight in this area. Most jurisdictions in the world are a fragmented, chaotic, organisationally specific group of people striving for elements of what we're doing, whereas New Zealand is very much a coordinated, focused effort led by the NGCC business unit. And then finally, we have a delivery partner in Crown Infrastructure Partners. Yesterday, Graham Mitchell spoke. We work very closely with Graham's team to leverage their investment program around mobile black spots. In fact, we were a huge contributor to the requirements around where they are putting all of the RCG investment. As you can appreciate, because we have people across emergency services that go everywhere, we have the means to record where there isn't capability. So we had a lot of intel to help in terms of defining those requirements. CIP have been a really good partner for us because they have a wider government telecommunications and investment lens, and we work with them quite closely to make sure investment is aligned to, wherever possible, make good use of it in emergency services. Lastly, I suppose I just want to leave you with the thought that, you know, when the chips are down, it's a very, very consoling thing to know that you can call us in emergency services and we will respond. Whether your house is on fire, someone's broken in and assaulted you, or you've had a heart attack, you know, we are there for you. And this investment is around helping our frontline responders be more effective in providing you, quite personally, with a better service. So I'm very proud to be leading this, and I have a superb team of a lot of sworn staff who are wholly invested in making this work better for all New Zealand. So at that, I'll leave you with that thought and take questions.
Thank you so much, Chris. Great to hear about the network, the new critical communications network. I was really interested in a couple of things. You talked about the ticketing. I may have had experience with that in the last year or so.
Right.
It certainly doesn't give you the opportunity to negotiate your way out when the gentleman has already pushed go on the iPhone. Anyway.
Yes.
And I really did like your comment about the giggle around the 99% comment for particularly mobile operators. I think it's the RBI2 project is the first time I've heard geographic coverage started to be talked about pushing out to about 60-65%. So I do have a couple of questions for you. Do you have a direct relationship with providers such as the telcos and the WISPs, or are you going through CIP for that?
Okay, so CIP are our delivery partner in our investment program for this particular program, the Public Safety Network. They are running a process, procurement process, which will kick off in the next few months to procure our network capability. The sector has put together a series of requirements and worked very closely at writing an RFP, which we're currently in the process of finalising. It is our intention that the contracts will be with us, NGCC. CIP will manage the build process of building capability, but NGCC will have a direct relationship with the service providers, whoever they be, in the end. Then what will happen is our agencies will have participating agency subscription agreements, because it's really important for our agencies to have a direct operational relationship with their service providers. And what we've found with police over the last 6 or 7 years is that it's incredible to watch what a fresh set of eyes from telcos or application development companies, or just commercial industry has to offer coming into our sector. And so you get a lot of innovation happening as a result of that. But the NGCC will manage the contracts and ensure that the capability is sustainable going forward.
Oh, and just the last one, we see at the moment in California and Oregon, terrible fires. I mean, obviously the need for communications in that area. Do you, as an organisation, have links back to people in that environment, and are you getting any learnings from there?
Yeah, so I belong to a small group of global directors, program directors and agency directors. We meet on a monthly basis, plus on top of that I have the ex-president of FirstNet on my board. So we get that sort of feedback on kind of a daily basis as it comes through. I think some of the interesting learnings around that is that the use of deployables and a really smart strategy around deployables in emergency services, both operated by the service provider but also available and in the agency, is really critical to an effective response. The other thing is that we've learned that it's not just good enough to turn up and restore the capability, albeit slightly smaller than you might have had before, just for emergency services, because the great thing about having buying broadband cellular based stuff is that if we turn it on for us, we can turn it on for everyone else, including people who are using, say, 111 or 105 to call us. So that's sort of another aspect to this.
Sorry, Chris, I do have another question that's popped up. What's the strategy for bringing in initiatives already underway, like initial call answering point and electronic caller location indicator?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in the process of just reviewing our business unit strategy, which is really the sector strategy around investment in common capability. As part of that, we have an action zone that's to deal with ICAP, and I'm very keen to see a broad consideration of what we need to do with ICAP going forward. I've been pushing it for a number of years. We need to deal with it both as an look at it fundamentally as what kind of capability we need, opposed to thinking of it as a regulatory or a commercial thing. We need to start at what the capability looks like and then work back to, well, what are all the implications for everything else? That's my personal belief. But as I said, we're going to review our strategy, and there'll be plenty of wider consultation once we've got through that.
Cool. Hey, look, thank you so much for your time, Chris. I realise that you're really important. I realise you're really busy, mate. No,
thanks.
You're probably important as well, but yeah, and thanks for taking your time to be part of the conversation. And I know that Chris was prepared to fly to Hamilton and be part of the conversation on the day as well, but as we found, we have to utilise what we have. So thanks very much for your time, Chris.
Cheers, Craig. Thanks, everyone.